Hello and greetings from sunny Marbella. I'm about to start reading from Ion. I hope you enjoy it. Chapter 1, Whitewater. In the endless, cold, velvety darkness of space, a Hopper space shuttle serenely entered the atmosphere of a planet known as Whitewater. Shantara, a lilac-skinned, purple-haired Kalataskian, was piloting. She was focused on their landing spot, a back alley which had a wide enough area for her to safely bring the ship down. As she focused, she shifted her weight in the large black pilot's chair, her slim build barely taking up 3/4 of it. Her co-pilot, Roland, a rotund, balding humanoid in his mid-40s, was focused on the auxiliary screens, keeping the ship balanced while Shantara expertly navigated her way to land with hardly a bump. Roland looked like he was going to speak, but Shantara glared at him. Those were the rules she had set up. When she was landing, she would not have anyone speak to her. She began the post-flight checks. The ion drive was full after their stint in the ion corridor. The atmosphere was breathable, as was expected, and there were no pollutants, which were going to damage the crew. All the sensors were green. She shut down the engines and illuminated the green go light in the passenger hold. The briefing notes she had picked up earlier were on the control panel. Roland had been staring at them for nearly an hour. He didn't like to ask. He knew he'd get his head bitten off, but mission notes were not supposed to leave the mission briefing room. She hadn't looked at them, and the mission was just to fly in and fly out again. When the crew they carried, just one person, Kel Elin of Eldoria, had completed his mission. It wasn't more complicated than that, so why take the paperwork? Shantara had brought the hopper down in a side street, and the cloak had held. It was a low-technology planet, so she hadn't expected any jammers or other devices which would have neutralized the cloak, although lately, with the followers gaining control, technology was arriving in many more places. A rather surprised cat ran off. But other than that, after scanning and rescanning it appeared that they had not been noticed. She flicked the switch which activated the ramp at the back. It was a hopper with no connection to the bay, so they had only had radio contact with Kel since they left Mission Command base nearly 3 hours earlier. Shantara smiled as she watched hungrily as Kel walked down the ramp. He was handsome, 6'6", muscular build, long black curls, and a confidence in his walk as he strode down the ramp. She couldn't take her eyes off of him, but that was pretty normal for her. She then moved the mission briefing notes. Roland had a dilemma. He wanted to ask, but he wasn't sure what her response would be. I thought they were not supposed to take those out of the briefing room. Shantara smiled. Oh, I was in such a hurry I forgot to put them down. I haven't had time to read the brief properly yet. She swiveled her chair to face Roland and was running her nails over the communication array. He couldn't help watching. He was fascinated by her purple nails. Then she turned and knocked the papers off the desk. He reached to pick them up for her. He put them on the console as she read, Kel Elin, KE-237, search and eliminate Ignatius Drolan. Narrowcast received from the Black Lamb, Whitewater, suspected follower agent, retrieve all equipment, maximum prejudice. Roland smiled. Well, hardly a long message to remember, and we don't really need to know much anyway, do we? All we have to do is to wait here and take Kel back. Shantara looked at the briefing and then at Roland. Yes, we are Kel's drivers. Well, I wouldn't like to be Mr. Drolan this afternoon at 7:26 when Kel bursts through the tavern bedroom door and starts blasting him. Roland smiled. I agree. Kel can be a vicious bastard when he wants to be. He had to ask, how is it going between the two of you? Roland was watching her intently, watching every curve, every movement. Shantara blushed, a darker shade of lilac. None of your business. I'd like to say, well, but I'm not so sure about that. He was all over me when I first arrived, taking me to the cafeteria, showing me around. Now he seems awkward and offish around me. He got what he wanted, I suppose, and now the whole base knows about my indiscretion. Roland blushed himself and looked away for a moment to recover his composure. I doubt the whole base knows. I did hear something. Then I thought Nyunko were an item. Shantara smiled. So did I. Now I'm in more trouble because of him, as I was supposed to download a load of figures for this mission. I spent ages trying to catch him to speak to at breakfast, and then he didn't want to know. He is really messing me up, and I really want the permanent position here. This could get me kicked out. I forgot to do it. I've left my code book on base, so I have no access. I don't suppose you could help. Roland thought about it. You could do it when you get back, can't you? We don't have to give our report straight away. Shantara shook her head. I'm already in trouble and on report. Please help. If I do it here, it won't go through the main database for a time-related stamp, so they won't know what I did the download. I need to do the assessments while we wait for him. Please, come on. I'd help you. I will make it worth your while. She took her mission flask out of her pocket and took a drink from it. Roland had had some of that before. He could smell the alcohol. He really wanted some. He had an alcohol problem. He knew that. Drinking on a mission was something he had occasionally done. He looked at her hopefully. She passed him the flask, and he took a long drink. The drink made him a little light-headed. It was the spin and the swirl that he knew he liked. He sat back and savoured it. This is good stuff. He hadn't felt that degree of reaction in a long time. The world did seem to be a much better place now. Shantara smiled as he keyed in his access codes and handed her the tablet. She took it from him and began searching for what she wanted. She clipped in a shell which would store the information and hit download. She then hesitated. Roland, I've just realised we could be in trouble for that drink. Can you sort the scanners like you usually do when we have had a tipple on duty? I wouldn't like our little secret found out. Roland knew it was absolutely against the rules to access the system when they were off base, and they weren't covered by the base's firewalls, so the system could be compromised. And that would give access to Mission Command. That screamed in the back of his mind, but it was Shantara. He could trust her. It was the right thing to do. Download complete, she removed the shell and handed him back the tablet, so that while the system was open, he could do his usual hack of the med computer to ensure it didn't pick up on the alcohol in their blood when they got back. That he knew how to do. He'd done it a few times when he'd had a flask with her. Kel hesitated outside the door and took a deep, dry and slightly dusty breath. He held it for a moment to calm his nerves, and then breathed out. He had to focus, and having had 3 hours of Shantara on the hopper, that was hard. His head was definitely not clear. Part of him kept saying that he thought nothing of for her, and he should keep away. Everything seemed muddled. He shook his head and tried to focus. He focused on the past, on his training. Memories of his master's voice flooding through his mind, and the details of his mission were clinging hopefully to the periphery of his thoughts. Focus, focus. Ignatius Drummond, eliminate him. Take all the equipment, return. It was very straightforward. But nothing seemed straightforward these days. Anticipation and doubts ran through his conscious thought, crawling unbidden from his unconscious to create a spiralling mental anguish of excitement and fear. He had to go in there and get what they needed. No need for it to be complicated. He looked over his shoulder for a moment as his body tensed. He absent-mindedly brushed his hand over the reassuring bulge at the side under his duster coat made by the Carillion blaster, which hung there. He found it reassuring that it was there. Like many things, he checked over and over again before, during, and after one of these missions. Not that he was likely to forget it, but somehow his mind always played those tricks. He always checked and checked again. He cast a glance to his left and right, behind him, and reassured himself that he was alone on the dusty windswept veranda which encircled the building. It was just as it had been described to him, and he'd seen the aerial photographs. He knew the layout fairly well from the plans they had managed to get hold of. It was also a quiet time of the evening outside the bar, as everyone was mostly inside by now or would arrive much later. Both ways on the veranda were clearly illuminated by the light which flooded from the windows. He had it to himself. All the houses and shops down the street were lit by the usual gas lights, giving a warm yellowish glow, the glow which reassured him that the street too was empty. The shops had security lights, the houses between them were lit, and the light flooded from their windows. The leisure house down the road was the brightest of all, lit with many glowing red orbs. The alleys to the side dark enough for the clientele to arrive and leave without being identified or noticed. At the end of the road, the livery stable had its doors open, and inside Kell could see the owner bedding the horses down for the night. As he watched what must have been the last of the horses came back, its rider was bent over the saddle, trail-worn, dusty, and as he pushed his horse to a trot, he was obviously glad to be back. He dismounted and jumped to the ground, and handed the reins to the stable boy, who had come out to meet him, and who led the horse inside. The lone rider then sauntered off towards the hotel at the end of town, next to the livery stable. The other stable boy shut the large stable doors, and the end of the street was thrown into darkness. Kell turned to focus on the weather-beaten bare wood door in front of him. Scars of previous gunfights had been sanded, but had still left their mark. Kell's long black curls tumbled down his black leather dusty coat, which had seen many years' use. As he paused for a moment, focusing, the crow feathers woven into his hair, a thing his tribe did, moved about in the wind as the wind was getting up. The scent of old wood, stale alcohol, and smoke vaguely hung around the door. It filled his senses, mixed with a vague aroma of sweetgrass. He hesitated and held back from going in. His green eyes flashed from left to right, trying to penetrate the darkness where the streetlights and houses' light could not reach. Something was troubling him, but nothing he could grasp. So he translated it to being the feeling that someone was watching him, which of course they were. He was a tall, handsome stranger in town, dressed in a long, flowing black leather duster coat, who had strode out of nowhere and was standing outside the tavern without going in. His hesitation was making him stand out more than if he had just walked in. Whitewater was a big town in comparison to many others in Kulak, full of people who were either nosy or keen to make a fast killing from selling information, so of course he could explain it. That was enough for him to brush it aside as irrelevant, though it lingered disturbingly on the edge of his consciousness. He readied himself physically and mentally. He took a deep breath and opened the door and took a step forwards. His muscular frame blocked the light from flooding out. He let the breath out and strode inside. His heavy metal-shod boots seemed almost noiseless, lost in the hum of conversation. He did a visual sweep of the area. Determination accentuated his slightly thick-set brow, accentuating his slightly primitive features. He kept walking when he was sure that others continued their conversation, either oblivious to his imposing, menacing presence, or consciously trying not to be noticed. He strode towards the bar, his coat sweeping just above the dusty, sawdust-strewn floor. As he walked, it swung away to reveal his blasters, which looked to anyone who was paying attention like a pair of Colt peacemakers, one on each side. The belt of daggers across his chest glinted in the lights from the tables and the gas ceiling lights. Some saw the peacemakers, some saw the daggers. Those who noticed either instinctively reached to check their own weaponry. He did note who they were. Some tried not to get his attention by carrying on conversations or purposely looking away. The candlelight on the tables cast an eerie glow, illuminating the faces of those who sought solace and entertainment that night in the Black Lamb Tavern. The wind outside was now getting up and howled around the building, making the tavern sign outside swing with an irritating squeak. There was very little paint left of the original painting of the Black Lamb, and it was blasted by the weather and bullet holes. The gust of wind blew rubbish and vegetation down the street as the door swung shut behind him. In that moment he felt very small in the vastness of space, in the tiny tavern, The tiny town of Whitewater, on the planet of Kulak, almost lost in the universe with its small solar system. It was an insignificant green and blue ball nestled precariously between two far larger planets as the three jauntily orbited their shared sun. It would have been a totally overlooked planet but for the mining and the medicinal Whitewater from which it got its name. The mining buildings and houses were built of wood and clung tenaciously to the wide main street. Some had obviously been constructed in a hurry a long time ago. The planks of wood that had been nailed together to create them and the ones nailed on to preserve them looked like a patchwork. Cole focused his mind back on the inside of the tavern and looking around the room and taking in the faces. That made those who were observing him nervous. Many tensed their fingers involuntarily or voluntarily, moved a hand to where a weapon was concealed or not so concealed. Any one of them could be a lookout for the man he was here to kill. The man obviously wasn't in the bar. That was at least a relief, as the bar shootout and having to avoid the innocent did not appeal. He watched for movement. He watched for someone who might be a lookout for a man he assumed was upstairs. He was also conscious about being in a room full of strangers who were probably armed and fired up after the earlier altercation. His body tensed, expecting trouble any moment. As nothing happened, he relaxed a little. The people in the bar would not be this relaxed if there was a gunman amongst them. Kel re-evaluated his impression of this backwater town as he began to spot more technology. It was concealed, but evident even in the darkness of the candlelit room. In his peripheral vision, he spotted eyes which were a little too bright. They had the aura of being augmented. He noticed advanced watches and signs of integral subdermal augmentation. In the shadows, there were those who stared into empty air, while hands wearing gloves moved on their tabletops. It was enough for him to understand that what appeared primitive and what had been reported to Mission Command was not strictly accurate. They had what information they had, which had been gathered from years of agents reporting back. This information was a little off, but not enough to make the mission harder. Also, he raised an eyebrow as he realized that he was almost likely being scanned and probably targeted by augmented weaponry. This could be a follower trap. The message had come through, and of course, as always, they had responded to try and help. Perhaps a little too as always, he thought, as he walked across the crowded barroom. Each table was lit by a candle dug into a mound of wax from the previous candles over the years. The tables were old, their wood worn smooth by countless customers over the years. Many showed obvious signs of basic repairs, which was typical of most border planets. Fights were common, and damage to the tables always a possibility. The Black Lamb was itself rustic, its windows dusty, and the floorboards coated with a dusting of dirty wood shavings, which were suspiciously dark in places. The bar stretched across the far wall. Behind it, the barman had been busying himself washing tankards. Kel watched him as he broke off from his task to serve a couple of customers with a shot of whiskey and a tall glass of a blue, probably local drink made from the water before moving down the bar. He was watching Kel. Kel knew it. As Kel got nearer, the barman hesitated, then came over and put both hands on the bar, cloth in hand, to meet Kel's glower. Kel thought, smart. I now know where your hands are and that you don't mean harm. Good. The barman was a tall, thin man, about mid-30. His face was clean-shaven, other than a neatly trimmed moustache. His hair was worn short and neatly combed. He cast a look in Kel's direction, and there was a flash of hope in his face, the flicker of a smile. Kel reprimanded himself, as his first impression had been that the man had shifty appearance, that his smile was fake. Of course he was nervous. Kel had only been called in because there was a problem. The box of broken glasses behind the bar wasn't lost on Kel. Several lacerations and some impressively developing bruises on the barman's face and arms were testament to the day's happenings. A bandage was making one arm look obviously bulky, where there had probably been a bandage under his shirt. Looking at him, Kel realized that more than some of the bloodstains or the sawdust probably belonged to the barman. That he could still do his job and tried to smile considering what had happened was quite remarkable, really. The bar was crowded and with probably oblivious customers. Every table was full or at least occupied, and the hum of conversation filled the air. Most of the customers were smartly dressed, which struck Kel as odd, in an outlying planet, but since the followers had arrived there had been more business and things were different on many planets. The men in general favoured black tailored suits, waistcoats and thin ties fastened around mandarin collars with an ornate silver representation of something like a buffalo or wolf, jeans and cowboy boots, which were clearly a fashion. The women elegantly fluttered about in wide, frilled long dresses, held out by hoops. Hair for men was short and neat. Hair for the women was elaborately dressed curls, which fell down to their shoulders. In the corner, a piano player was hammering out a tune, and customers around the room involuntarily tapped out the rhythm with their fingers on the wooden tables. It was only when the pianist reached for his beer and the piano carried on playing, the keys depressed seemingly by themselves, that Kel realised the piano player wasn't playing at all. On the table to the right, as he crossed the room, there was a poker game going on. It was in full flow, and there was quite a pile of coins in the middle, but the players themselves had quite large stacks in front of them as well. It was a high-stakes game. To the left there was a roulette table. The wheel was spinning, the table loaded with coins in their chosen boxes, the resident's fate hanging in the balance. He didn't stop to watch. The barman took a deep breath and spoke in a broad accent as Kel stepped up to the bar. "And what can I get you, sir?" Kel looked about, taking in the nervous expressions of those who were watching him, either overtly or covertly. "I'm looking for the Iridium mercenary, Ignatius Drolin. We received your narrowcast earlier today. I'm here to help." The look of relief on the barman's face was legendary. Thank the gods that someone was paying attention. "He is upstairs, room 7. He has my barmaid with him. Please be careful. She's a good girl and a complete innocent in all this." The man arrived this morning, demanding food, and busted up a couple of my customers after someone tried to steal his briefcase. He killed the thief, but turned on some of my other customers. He then dragged my barmaid. She was screaming upstairs, and I haven't seen her since. His face was on one of the shout sheets, which was circulated as a murderer and a thief. A reward is mentioned, so I contacted you immediately. Kel nodded once, and the customers in the bar, who had overheard what he had said, now visibly relaxed, and some even smiled at him. They then went back to their drinks. Kel strode to the stairs and took them 2 at a time. Pulling his blasters from their holsters, he got to the top of the stairs. He located room 7 and without stopping kicked the door in. The lock wasn't strong and the door flung open, smashed into the wall but didn't swing back. Kel was already through the doorway and into the room to land cat-like on the carpet inside. He evaluated the room, and the red beams from his blasters cut through the dimness of the candlelit room, with its curtains pulled and ripped into the man who was hiding behind the bed, his guns aimed at the door. The force of the beam's blast pushed Ignatius back onto the floor. The barmaid screamed and stared at the now dead man. She had been standing against the side wall behind the chest of drawers. When the man fell to the ground, she put her hands in the air, reached for her dress, which lay in a bundle on the bed, and ran for the door. She hesitated for a moment, her green eyes meeting Kel's. "Thank you." Her voice was broken and high-pitched. She had a briefcase in her hand. Kel holstered one of his weapons, reached out and took it from her as she left the room. She tried to hold on to it, but he pulled it off of her. Kel watched her carefully, one eye still on the corpse just in case, but Ignatius wasn't going anywhere. "You're welcome." She managed a smile and then ran off down the corridor. Kel stepped into the room, holstered the other weapon and shut the door. He walked slowly and cautiously over to the prone body, noticing that contrary to what he had expected, everything at the body looked expensive. From the manicure to the hair, ornamented looks, and tan, so Ignatius clearly had spent a lot on presenting a very acceptable corpse. Once he knew that Ignatius was definitely dead, he set about meticulously going through the man's belongings. He searched the clothes, which were strewn around the room, pulling out ID cards and other items, which he put into a pile on the bed. He then opened the briefcase and put the things inside to be able to carry it a lot easier. Kel didn't pay much attention as he was taking everything, but there was a radio transmitter and a small black box, a small book, and what looked like a pen already in the briefcase. Kel felt nervous. Something was wrong. The man had been prepared and was waiting for him, and the woman too keen to take the briefcase with her. He was listening intently and keeping an eye on the door when he heard something and put the briefcase down behind the bed. He drew both blasters and was ready when the door opened and the barmaid came in, armed and firing. She didn't get to step into the room before Kel blasted her backwards into the hallway by a well-aimed shot to the head. Kel holstered his blasters, grabbed the briefcase and strode down the stairs. He threw a glance at the bar as the room fell silent. All eyes were on him. The barman looked up and opened his mouth as if he was going to say something, hesitated, then spoke in a broken voice. "Thanks." Kel strode across the bar. He hesitated for a moment. "Not as innocent as you thought." He then walked out of the bar, leaving a stunned silence as the door swung closed behind him. They were welcome to try and claim the reward. He wasn't even sure who had offered it. First he'd heard of it. Kel stood on the veranda. The street outside was almost empty. Since he had gone inside, pockets of people had gathered around the shop doorways, probably after having heard the blaster shots, and a couple of speeders, which looked like wooden carts without horses, hovered along the dusty road, blowing the dust over those who stood too close. Kel took it all in and took a deep breath and relaxed. He felt the reassuring solidarity of the briefcase, his true quarry, and of course the blasters, which were within reach. Hopefully what it contained would make a lot of difference to Mission Command, and the followers would rue the day they decided that Whitewater was a safe place to set up yet another outpost. There were so few places still free, and this was one of them. No doubt Ignatius was one of the many, and thankfully he had chosen to make his presence felt in a way which had made Kel's job a whole lot easier. He had drawn attention to himself just because of a simple argument in the bar. He could so easily have gone unnoticed. The barmaid had no doubt been a sleeper cell for a long time. Oh well, he thought, 2 for the price of 1. He had done his job. The mission was complete. Kel set off along the veranda and turned around the corner of the building. At the back of the alleyway, the Planet Hopper decloaked as they spotted Kel coming, its silver hull reflecting any light from the road as the rear access ramp lowered. The cylindrical chrome exoskeleton of the hull was starkly modern in contrast to the weather-beaten wood of the buildings around it. Another cat, which had been stealthily stalking a mouse, had chosen the wrong alley. As the ship appeared, it gave a loud meow and leapt to the safety of a ledge after nimbly scaling the wooden wall. It took a moment to hiss its disapproval of the interlopers before disappearing off into the gloom. Kel didn't wait any longer. Yet the excited shouts in the bar could be clearly heard, and no doubt his handiwork would soon attract attention. He ran up the ramp, and it closed behind him. The engines jumped into life as Kel took his seat and strapped himself in, still clutching the briefcase. The ship raised up from the ground, boosting itself above the buildings as it cloaked and glided effortlessly away with an almost unnoticeable swooshing sound. Kel adjusted his seatbelt as the hopper climbed sharply up out of the atmosphere, unseen by the lawkeepers who were just arriving at the Black Lamb. The lights, a stark contrast to the gentle candle and gaslit illumination of the buildings around them and the street lights which were just beginning to light. The hopper elegantly left the planet of blue and green behind in the blackness of space. There was a slight orange glow as they exited the planet's atmosphere, which played on the hull and Kel's face as he looked out of the porthole window. As the ship levelled out, Kel unclipped his seatbelt. All around him was chrome and black, immaculately clean and efficiently stowed, with each of the panels labelled to show what they contained. Kel opened a sliding door and put the briefcase on a shelf inside. He slid the door shut and breathed a sigh of relief. In his mind, the job was done now, mission successful. He could almost feel the inertial dampeners compensating for the acceleration as they sped away from Kulak and left the Nimbus galaxy. Kel sat down and smiled to himself as the intercom sprang into life and a silvery, affected female voice spoke. "Welcome back, Kel. I trust everything went smoothly." Kel nodded, though nobody could actually see, almost without a hitch, but an oversight that the barmaid hostage was actually one of them, but easily dealt with. "Style and grace, Shantara, style and grace." Shantara smiled in the cockpit. She involuntarily brushed her hair behind her shoulders and checked her makeup in the reflection of the chrome. "No loose ends? Did you get what you were looking for?" Kel smiled. He won't be carrying any more messages, and whatever is going on there has just had a serious setback. "I did, thank you. A communication device and possibly more. I have no idea what the technology is, but I'm sure it's best that we have it. I trust the wait wasn't too tiresome." He smiled to himself. His sullen features brightened as he raised an eyebrow and waited for Shantara's answer to his very loaded question. Shantara glared at the microphone. "Not at all. Always a pleasure. After all, I had Roland for company." Shantara contemplated the switches and buttons on the control panel and flipped one or two while she thought that Roland wasn't looking. He looked back and stared at her as he saw her switching a live channel off. She smiled. "Did you turn the external comms on earlier for some reason? Roland shook his head. "No idea how that happened." "No harm done. They are off now." "Thank you. Very kind of you to mention it. One does one's best." Kel nearly choked and stifled his laughter. He knew that even Shantara, with all her meditation and training, sometimes had difficulty putting up with Roland and his almost constant irrelevant chatter. It would seem that informant was reliable. He did have the communication devices, and possibly more. "What's on the screen, Shantara? It's all just figures to me. Anything I should worry about?" The intercom crackled slightly, and instantly Kel regretted his question, as he could almost hear Roland fluffing up and getting ready for a detailed and mostly unnecessary monologue of whatever he knew about them. Shantara answered. "Nothing to worry about, just an earlier download. I was running a diagnostic." He flipped the comms off. "Sorry, Shantara. Nearly blew it there. You must have left the last download showing in the system." He took the keyboard and ran a history delete. "There, no harm done." Shantara breathed a sigh of relief. That was clumsy, and if Kel had been in any way computer literate, he might work out what she had just been downloading. Thankfully, it was only visible on the main screen in the hold. Nothing showed up on Roland's tablet. Shantara smiled. "Thank you, that was close. I got the figures I need. No point Kel being able to tell everyone. I forgot my task is there. It's just that my task is there. It is just between us two." She put her hand on top of his pudgy hand. He was now all of a fluster. Part of him wanted to ask what she was up to, but that quiet voice seemed to be slowly disappearing. She took the flask from her pocket and took another drink. She smiled and offered him some. He took it gladly. That drink was amazing. He couldn't get enough of it. He had quite a craving for it now. After he took a long drink, he smiled. "Don't worry." Kel stared out into space blankly and didn't answer. The intercom crackled and Roland's voice came over it again, this time broken up. "I really must fix that intercom. It is a bit crackly. Hold on a second." Then it crackled louder and fell silent. Roland smiled, knowing full well he had just broken it so that he could continue his conversation with Shantara in private. Kel cursed under his breath and shouted profanities at the now-dead intercom. There was a slight crackle and then silence. "Roland, just leave things alone. Great, now the intercom is broken and you are no doubt going to spend the next few hours, the majority of this journey, fixing it. So what do I do now?" He then realised he was talking to the now-dead intercom and gave up. He heard Shantara's voice, muffled, under a coat hung on a hook on the wall. "Use the secondary intercom in my coat. Unfortunately, it only links to my headset. It is Roland's one which is broken. He is not getting his hands on mine." So what do we do now to pass the time until we get back? Kel smiled. No idea. I prefer the Hopper design where there is a connecting door between the passenger hold and the crew cabin. Why didn't we take one of those? Shantara took a while to answer, and when she did, her voice sounded stressed. Sorry, just removing some wires from over my control switches. Thank you, Roland. Leave that alone, or I swear I will shoot you. Right, that was in case we had trouble. The shielding between the cabin crew and passenger hold on the other hoppers isn't strong enough. If you had had trouble and come in hot with following fire, we could have been caught in the crossfire. Kel shrugged. They were never worried on our other missions. Shantara thought for a while. Hostilities are escalating. They are more aware of us now, and we have done some serious damage to them in the past few months. Kel raised an eyebrow. Fair enough. So how long until we get back there? Roland was mumbling something as Shantara clicked her intercom. Not long. So what are your plans for this evening? Then she coughed nervously. Kel looked down at his blaster and slipped it back into his holster. He took the other one out. I booked the meditation room for a bit of unbridled solitude and sentimentality. It has been 2 years to the day since the followers raided my village. I thought I'd mark the anniversary. Kel paused in contemplation, staring out of the window. There was a lost look in his eyes, which he was glad nobody saw. Well, it is time that I did the ceremony of remembrance. Yes, I'm fine, and no, I don't need any company. He managed to smile and hoped that he had preempted any suggestions she may have for keeping him company. He had made one mistake already, which he deeply regretted, and he was not going to make another. Shantara's voice was gentle, soft, and obviously intended to be as alluring as she could manage. Well, if you want to talk about it afterwards, we could spend some time in my cabin. You have never said much about it. Kel focused on his weapon and looked down the sight, pointing it at Shantara's coat. He was having feelings he didn't want. His head was telling him to ignore them, but thankfully the tearing pain of losing his family seemed to keep them at bay. I don't talk about it. I don't want to talk about it, but it doesn't stop me thinking about it. That is my business, Shantara, but thank you. It is not something I am going to forget in a hurry. Me and the rest of Mission Command, no doubt. There isn't one person who hasn't lost someone, you included. Part of him wanted the company. That would inevitably happen, but he knew he would only be using her, and that would make a bad situation even worse. Shantara clicked the intercom on. You know you are not alone. She stopped just short of saying that he had her, but he knew what she meant to say and bit his lip hard. I know it's hard to accept, but there might still be more. The followers take prisoners and convert. They take slaves often as well. Who knows? The information on what you have recovered today might give us some sort of indication where some of these people have been taken to. It is supposed to be something like that. Kel took a deep breath. Your positivity is quite charming, but I'm afraid your words are a bit lost on me today. I wasn't told exactly what we were going after. It just might. But whatever happens, we have it, and that is a bit of hope, I suppose. I knew exactly what they had been going after, but that was classified and way above her security clearance. In the cockpit, Shantara was pouting, and Roland looked up, momentarily went to speak, and then, for once, thought better of it. He went back to sorting out the bundle of wires on his lap, which he had got from under the intercom array. The hours rolled by, broken up occasionally by the crackle from the intercom as Roland attempted to fix it. Kel passed the time by checking his guns and thinking, far too much thinking, and memories and thoughts which came unbidden and unwelcome. He had been so glad when he had been given the mission. That sort of action mission which guaranteed violence was exactly what he needed. But now that it was over, it was almost worse. Now he had to come down from the adrenaline rush and action to the potential of far too much time to think back at Mission Command, and likelihood of another mission back-to-back was minimal. Shantara broke the silence. What are you thinking? Kel looked annoyed, began pointing the blaster at her coat. He wanted peace, and the last thing he needed was what he knew was a difficult situation. He sighed and quickly considered his reply. He had to make sure he didn't give her a smidgen of hope without being downright nasty. I don't do much by way of thinking, Lark. Especially not today, he lied. I leave that to you technical and sensitive types. Shantara snapped her jaw shut in annoyance. It was now in the now quiet solitude of the metal shell flying effortlessly through space. Kel did, of course, think. He thought a lot. The images came unbidden. He was back home in his village. The circular cob walls and reed roofs spiralled out from the main meeting room, and campfires burnt brightly in the chilled evening air. Some sheltered around them, but the smell of cooking and the smoke from the wood fire, aromatic Alegness wood, which burnt with slightly citrus aroma, the fur he wore, the leather of the straps on his body armour, the other accessories mingled with the smell of cattle, goats, and people to build such a strong aromatic memory that he could almost smell it now. The ghosts of his life wandered again, laughing and living like he wanted to remember them, perfect forever, unaging, unsullied by what had happened. But even in that moment of solace, where he could imagine everything was all right, images came to remind him how far it was from the reality of the situation. Unbidden came the images of his burnt and blasted village, bodies laying everywhere, people he knew, loved and grown up with, were lying dead and dying. His wife and child, he had loved them so much, and he'd found their blackened bodies in the ashes of his home. He had nothing left, not a thing survived the ferocity of the flames. He was almost glad when Shantara's voice crackled across the intercom. It had made him jump slightly, but thankfully his blaster was back in its holster by then. What was it like being a hunter in your tribe? Did you enjoy it? Wrong question. There was a pause, which hung in the silence as Kel scowled. Look, what do you think? His voice was harsh, berating Shantara because she had broken into something and he wanted to take it out on someone. I'm sorry, life was simple back then. I love my life. Life could have been a pleasure if it had been allowed to continue. His last words were almost growled. Shantara was a slim woman who, if she had been human, would have placed looks-wise in her mid-30s. Her eyes flashed a vibrant purple. She smiled, her skin flushed darker since Kel's last words. She was almost boyish in her looks, which contrasted dramatically with her ample breasts. Her standard-issue blue boiler suit clashing slightly with her skin and was totally unflattering. She looked at the tubby, dishevelled workmate, who was still unscrambling wires and getting them in more of a mess with every passing hour. He wasn't looking at her. He was trying to balance a manual on his knee while he tried to put out a small fire he had caused by igniting its pages with his soldering iron. She was thinking, perhaps she could try and make Kel jealous. She could feel him slipping away. She had thought that night with her would have made the difference, but rather than cementing a relationship, it had made him more distant. That absolutely was not what she wanted. He looked away when the fire was out. She looked away when the fire was out. She thought about it and couldn't understand why Kel was so uncommunicative. He could have been quite chatty by now. He should have been quite chatty by now. She had managed to get something into his morning coffee, which seemed to be failing to work. So what was your homeworld like? What was your village like? I saw it in a book I found in the library on base. Those houses look amazing, so full of character, smell of the campfire and dinner cooking. I went camping once on my world, just a night, but I've never forgotten the smell, the smoke and the fresh grass. Kel scowled and clenched his fist. He wanted to say something that would shut her up. He was just hurting too much to want to talk. All I remember are those same buildings burnt to the ground, my people lying dead and dying, and me among them. And yes, I do wish I had died there too. And no, I don't want to talk about it. They're all gone now, my family, my wife carrying my unborn child, my other 2 children. Their bodies were blackened and charred by the time I got to them. I will never know what my unborn child would have been like. I will never again feel Shakar's gentle touch and her body next to mine. I will never again hear her words of wisdom, both to me and to those who came to her. Look, Shantara, these are not memories I really want, especially today. It was a very commanding statement. He went back to watching the lights of the space between dimensions rushing past the window. He focused on his new life and his new home, Mission Command. He focused on how those at Mission Command knew what was happening, while many planets were unaware of what was going on, happily almost worshipping their so-called saviours, the followers, the murderers who had come to as such welcome guests. Within the hour, the thrusters changed their vibration, and the sparkles of the interdimensional space elongated as they re-entered normal space, and they made their descent towards a familiar starfish shape of Mission Command's base on an outlying planet far from most systems and far from the followers' influence. Its silver tendrils spread out over the moon's crust. Shantara piped up, "I know you don't want to hear it, but you impress me. You never give up, do you?" She took a breath as she considered her own situation, trying to find common ground. Kel was getting really angry by now. He was looking forward to a long shower, a bit of peace, and to debrief, which would mean putting his thoughts in order. He also knew that he didn't really want to upset her, as he knew he may have overstepped the mark already with that ill-thought-out night. Shantara spoke in sincere, almost whisper. "Is it the same for us both? Not a life. It is the same for us both. Not a life where it is easy to imagine happiness. I train with people, then I see empty seats. When their crews come home without them sometimes, I don't know how to cope." Kel laughed. "I bet you don't, or you wouldn't keep asking and reminding me of everything. Nothing really makes me feel that much better. But I have need for revenge, and it is my life now. There is no space for anything else, and if that upsets or offends you, just stop asking." Shantara's brow furrowed. "That kind of attitude can't be healthy. Haven't they sent you to the base psychologist?" Kel bit his lip in frustration. "Shantara, not everyone needs to talk about their feelings. Not everyone sees it as a problem. Commander Zack no longer sees it as a problem, so I don't see why you do. I have proven myself to be loyal and that I am in control. They're very happy for me to kill as many followers as I can, just as I am. It makes me an effective killing machine. They appreciate it and ask very little of me. I have a room, food, and that is the best I can ask for. It won't bring my family back, but it makes me feel a whole lot better. You're going to have to stop trying to understand me. It is not the road to a deep and meaningful relationship. It was one night. I made a mistake. I am sorry, and you're going to have to get over it." Tears filled her eyes. Roland attempted a smile. She flicked off the intercom. "I feel so hopeless, as hearing it in black and white really makes me realise that I've been a fool, but a hopeful one. It is the upset of it being the anniversary, and I have made my mind up to forgive him for what he has said." She looked down at the controls, and as the ship brought them down to land, she flipped the intercom on. "Okay, I understand. I have to concentrate on the landing now. We can speak later." Roland looked up from the now repaired and tidy communication system. He frowned and looked at Shantara quizzically. "Don't be silly. There's little to concentrate on. Computers handle all the minute calculations and adjustments. I can't see why you—" Her glare was sufficient to drive him into contemplative silence. She focused on the terminal, her flawless skin furrowed by the scowl which had crept across her usually carefree countenance. Roland watched her. He was a middle-aged, balding man whose boiler suit mostly fitted him, but the zip struggled slightly to keep his copious waistline in check. His thinning dark brown hair was unkempt as he constantly ran his fingers through it, and his pudgy face was fixed in an almost constant sycophantic smile. He believed himself more intelligent than anyone else on the ship, and despite having to read the manual to repair the communications array, he was feeling extremely smug. Shantara cast a quick glance at the book and the tools and bits of now redundant wire which lay strewn around him, and almost sighed before she caught herself, focused forwards, relieved that she hadn't attracted his attention, and berating herself for even thinking of using him to make Kel jealous. Her voice was straining as she announced, "We will be landing presently. Better buckle up." The hopper lurched slightly as it negotiated the other traffic heading on and off base. Hoppers and other craft were coming and going. Transporters, supply ships, and all manner of other civilian and military craft navigated their way around each other. The hopper hovered slightly as Roland almost forgot the password and codes, and then they waited. Shantara helped by getting him to say them out loud. Then he got them right. They had to wait for the controller to give them the go-ahead to land and clearance for a particular port they had been allocated. When they finally got the landing coat, the instructions, Shantara brought the hopper effortlessly in on the outdoor landing pad they had been allocated. The clamps raised, and the hopper was securely grasped and moved forwards, sliding through the open doors of the hangar bay to be placed against the allocated airlock suitable for the dual entrance vehicle. There was a hiss as the pressures equalised, and the back and side ramps descended to make contact with the immaculately clean white walkway of Mission Command Docking Bay. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. That's the first chapter. I will have a go at reading the second chapter next time. Anyway, have a good evening.